Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have the full review of the TCL Forte SE. Let's get started. This is a low-end device, although its price does not correspond to the low end. From now on, I am anticipating you that this is a device that I would not recommend so much to buy it at the launch price, but wait for it to go much lower. In Mexico, it has been launched at a price of 5,499 pesos. On the screen, you see the reference price in dollars. But remember that the prices here are not the same as there. Its sole distributor is Telcel, and that is probably the reason for its high price. At this same price, it may have considerably strong competitors, so it is a difficult job, but let's see what it can offer us next. The design is simple, but with everything one would need in a device of this range. The camera is placed in a drop notch, so it has a good use of the front. Compared, for example, against Samsung devices that lately have had too large bezels, here we find a better utilized design. However, it does not offer Gorilla Glass to give us a little more security that the device will withstand a fall or a blow. On the right side is located the power button that is also fingerprint reader and volume buttons. At the top we have a microphone and the secondary speaker, as surprisingly it does have stereo sound. On the left side we have the tray where we can place a microSD card and also a nano SIM card. The second nano SIM card tray will be unlocked in some regions, but in Mexico it is locked by Telcel. At the bottom will be placed the main speaker, USB-C port, a microphone, and the headphone jack. All this frame we could say that comes in two pieces. The black piece that is part of the front and the blue piece that is part of the entire side, in both cases made of plastic with a texture for a good grip. This team has a thickness of 8.45 millimeters and a weight of 190 grams, placing it in what we see on average in smartphones today. This time I have the graphite gray color, but it is also available in light purple color. This back cover is made of plastic, but it has a nice anti-reflective finish that also prevents fingerprints from getting marked easily. So really the design is one of its strongest points aesthetically speaking, and we have a camera module with a fully reflective finish to give a touch of contrast to this back cover. Aesthetically it is good, but in terms of resistance it is not so good due to the fact that it does not have any certification against splashes or something similar. The screen will be simple. It has a size of 6.75 inches with 20:9 ratio, very traditional within the smartphone market, but its resolution is lower than one would expect in a device of this price, as it is only HD+, that is 720 by 1600 pixels, which is not enough to give you a detailed viewing experience. So videos will look unsharp and small text will appear even less sharp. It's funny that this device can't boast a great screen, because TCL is a manufacturer that has mainly become famous for its good screens in TVs, but here on the cell phone is not going to offer us a spectacular display. The brightness is barely what we expected. The minimum brightness is going to be good for comfortable use at night or indoors. It even has a dim light mode that is quite good for low light occasions. It also has some eye protection filters and has two color calibration modes, or you can go to advanced settings to choose the setting you like best. One point that is good about this screen is that it has 90 Hz in its refresh rate, so it could show you smooth movements and animations. However, the system does not have such smooth animations. For the most part, the animations feel very stiff, so you don't get 100% of the experience with 90 Hz unless you're doing vertical scrolling. However, TCL added its Next Vision software to optimize the viewing experience. So, in a way, through software, it tries to saturate the colors more and increase the contrast in order to give you a better display than you would find on a screen with these same specs. And I must say that from my point of view, they do make it as long as you're viewing the content from the front. I mean, this screen sounds like it has overly simple specs, but in practical life, it honestly doesn't look too bad. However, it's still an IPS panel, so it doesn't have such remarkable viewing angles, so if you're viewing content from the side, it's going to be very dim. So it's a screen that, in specs, disappoints in this price range. Although somehow, thanks to TCL's Next Vision technology, it manages to recover a little. Below you will hear an audio test recorded with the microphone of this device. Esta es una prueba en la grabación de audio utilizando este dispositivo que se llama TCL40SE. There are two things that are very curious. First of all, it only uses this microphone. I already did several tests with various applications, and it seems that this is either not a microphone or is never being used. So it only offers mono recording, which is unacceptable at this price point. And another curious thing is that it does not include a native app to record voice memos, but you have to install some other from Google Play Store. Fortunately, despite disappointing in the microphones, it does not disappoint in the speakers, which are two. In this case, both speakers do work, offering stereo sound. It's a very loud, considerably wide and distortion-free sound. I could even tell you that it has no frequencies that become annoying. Just be clear that the lower frequencies are still a bit weak. But how about listening to a small test, although remember that it's not the same as listening to it live? The sound software doesn't come with anything attractive. For example, it doesn't have an equalizer, nor some other settings similar to Dolby Atmos or something similar. So, the experience is simple, but fortunately the hardware sounds great. Also note that it has a headphone jack, a totally necessary addition for a device in this range. The front camera is 8 megapixels with f2 0-point aperture and fixed focus. The capture experience will be considerably agile and fast. This is possibly one of its strongest points, although it has no burst. It does have a beauty mode button in the lower left corner, with two settings available for adjustment. In the settings, you can enable whether you want to capture by pressing the volume buttons or even showing your palm. So these functions can be very useful when it's a bit tricky to reach the shutter, however, it seems to take a bit of time to react. Incidentally, it also has a quick release mode for the camera by pressing the power button twice. The quality of the selfies has surprised me for the better. Outdoors, we have good color, although the fact of having fixed focus means that if you get too close to the camera, you can go out of focus. So, the ideal is to take pictures with your arm outstretched and then you will get a good result. It doesn't feel like it has a very good quality lens, so noise is present. The colors are obviously not going to be as accurate, but for the price range it's fine. Indoors, we don't have as much definition, so it decreases the level of detail and increases the presence of grain, but it should be noted that the colors are still maintained with good saturation. In backlight, the preview still does not look optimized, but remember that it does have automatic HDR. So, the result is positive in terms of light balance, although the colors do not look very accurate, to say the least, especially in the brightest areas. But it is almost normal in devices of this price, although there are some other devices more specialized in photography that will give you better results. Even notice how we have a ghosting effect in areas that have movement for being a long exposure photography to compensate for the light. In the evenings, the color becomes a bit paler, but fortunately it still retains a good amount of detail if you are in front of artificial light. If you're in an area with indirect light, fortunately not as much noise appears in the photograph, and that's a very positive point. And in the most difficult environment possible, which is night backlighting, by default we have a very simple result. Although note that it allows you to turn on the screen as a kind of flash simulation to have a better balance of light. This front camera also allows us to use portrait mode, but it is not able to detect objects and its dynamic range is very low, so some areas come out completely white if they are too brightly lit. And this portrait mode at night will work well, but again with colors a bit pale. On the back we find the 50 megapixel main camera with f1.8 aperture and autofocus. And then we have two useless cameras that I call them marketing cameras, 2 megapixels each with f2.4 aperture. As with the front camera, we will find a considerably snappy capture, so it could be easy to capture the exact moment. I tried to capture number 3, although I practically captured number 4. It also has a burst that goes up to 20 pictures. But as you noticed, it takes a long time to start that burst, so it could become a bit complex to capture the exact moment. If we tap on the screen, we will be able to adjust the focus and exposure. However, note that it also has Pro Mode available, where we can regulate other parameters such as ISO, shutter speed, exposure compensation, white balance, and focus. However, it cannot capture in RAW. It does not have a document scanner directly integrated into the camera, nor does it recognize QR codes from the main interface, but it does have direct access to Google Lens, which is an application from which you can scan these codes. Moving pictures do not seem to be too much of a problem for this device, so we are anticipating that the quality of the camera will be very good. It does have a high-resolution mode to take pictures at 50 megapixels, but despite that, it doesn't seem to take advantage of the full resolution of that sensor. So, high-resolution photos I don't think will be available here. However, the outdoor pictures merging these pixels are of very good quality, giving us good colors, good contrast, good level of detail in general. So for this price, I think I really like the main camera. Notice how indoors, despite not having as much illumination, it still retains a good level of detail and there is virtually no noise in the darker areas. So, I like the results. In backlighting, very curious that the preview doesn't look bad at all. For an Android device, I was very surprised. The result is also positive. The shadow area does not have so much illumination, but enough to have a good display, and the highlights area does not look overexposed. So here I was very surprised, although you do get to notice a bit of chromatic aberration generated by the lens, which is not that high quality, but it's nothing serious. At night it will also take good pictures. I think this is one of its strongest points because the camera seems to perform well in different light conditions. In auto mode, we don't have as much detail, but enough to appreciate a good picture. And if you use the night mode, it is practically the same result, although it slightly increases the definition. The zoom is simple, showing that it does not get to take advantage of 100% of the 50 megapixel sensor, as it can have a maximum zoom 4x digital, which is not very remarkable in this price range, but it is appreciated that they are honest and do not put us at 10x all forced. Note that this device does not bring an ultra-wide camera, but you can use the panoramic mode to try to take these pictures with more space, and the result is good. Despite being several photographs stitched together, you don't get to notice it. So we have a good blending algorithm to have this resulting photo. The main camera does have autofocus, so it can take pictures of these small objects, maintaining a good level of detail and good color. This would be the result with the macro camera, which, as you will notice, although it handles color considerably well, unlike other devices, it doesn't really seem to generate as nice a bokeh effect as the main camera does. Also, it has a lot of grain, and so it ends up not giving me a satisfactory result. Fortunately, it seems that portraits do come out in good quality, focusing well on the foreground, including people and objects. So in the price range, I think it takes good portraits. Obviously, they're not going to be perfect or spectacular, but for the price, they come out well. The video recording can be up to full HD, so it delivers what you would expect. You can click on the screen to adjust focus and exposure, but it doesn't have a more advanced professional mode. When you start recording, you will be able to take pictures of the video and also pause and resume the content. In fact, it will also let you turn on the flashlight without the need to stop your recording, but you cannot rotate the front camera without first doing this action. The video is simple, and from the first test you realize that it doesn't have stabilization, but in terms of color and lighting it seems to be doing well. In fact, it's surprising that a device that feels simple otherwise in video should have video this stable. At least it doesn't feel like the focus is struggling from this first video. Indoors, we're also going to have good video quality, reducing noise nicely and maintaining color saturation even in this dimly lit environment. In backlight is very curious the behavior because the device has an HDR mode. First, we are watching a test video without HDR mode, and anyway we have an excellent result because it does not get to make abrupt changes in lighting in order to illuminate the face well. In fact, it is very surprising the result because there are other more expensive devices that have a lower performance, so this is one of its strongest points. And if you use the HDR mode, it illuminates the foreground better, although the background comes out a bit overexposed, but whether you use HDR mode or not, I like the result in both cases. At night, there is going to be more noise, but it seems to me that it reduces it in a good way. Again, the lack of stabilization is still felt, but in color, detail, and lighting, I think the result is completely positive for a device of this price. However, its weakest point in video recording will undoubtedly be the stabilization, since even walking or static is too noticeable, and if you start running, you will notice even more that it is not a device that is going to give you a very stable shot. The zoom of the video is also not something very positive to say, but fortunately it does not feel like a stretched image. It does seem to gradually optimize the level of detail, although it's a bit difficult to zoom in and out smoothly, and since it doesn't have stabilization, the result drops in level. The focus reacts quickly going from the second to the foreground, but in the reverse direction it reacts much slower and in more subtle movements. Fortunately, it still maintains a fairly accurate focus. It's actually surprising that it has this level of focus at this price point. It doesn't have slow motion, but it does have a slightly odd fast motion, as its settings are very professional, letting you choose the frame rate per second and the frequency of capture. So it can be a bit complex to use for users who are not used to these terms. The front camera also records in full HD. That I think is a good point, as there are other devices that dare to give you only HD quality here on the front. However, the result only stands out in definition because in reality the color and light management is not very positive, unlike what we saw on the main camera, which surprised us for the better. So the main camera is one of its strongest points in video recording, but the front camera is not. However, if we have a little more uniform light like indoors, even though it is not so intense, we have a good result with good colors and low noise level. At night, the colors will be considerably pale. It is not very accurate in this aspect, but for the price we could not demand more from it. In fact, I like that despite going to an indirect light area where there is a little more darkness, in fact the presence of noise is sufficiently controlled. According to the price, I don't think we could demand much more from it in this kind of challenging conditions. But if you are one of those who are looking for slow camera, fast camera or dual camera in this device, you won't find those features. This device comes with Android 13 and runs the TCL UI customization layer in its 5.0 edition. Unfortunately, it does not have a clear update policy, although in this price range we could not get so demanding since almost no manufacturer promises updates here. The system comes customized in aesthetics but doesn't add too many additional options. We do have some gestures available that are usually very common gestures on other devices as well, such as taking a screenshot by swiping 3 fingers down. In fact, fortunately, it does have the scroll capture that some devices in the lower ranges don't have. But something unexpected is that this device also has floating windows. This is something that very few devices in the price range will integrate, and it opens from the recent apps view. Even YouTube supports this format, and you can have both portrait orientation and switch to a landscape orientation, although you can't completely resize to your liking this little app, but it's something quite useful considering it's not a very common feature on devices in this price range. However, it doesn't offer more tools. The experience, the truth, is that it is very simple, but fortunately it will be a system with good stability. The device integrates a side fingerprint reader with the ability to register up to 5 different fingerprints. Unlocking is going to be positive. In fact, an attractive point is that it allows you to map some fingerprints specifically to open an application you want when unlocking with that same fingerprint. It also integrates facial recognition, but I do not recommend using it because it is only in 2 dimensions, so it is not as accurate and therefore does not have as much security. Fortunately, it does include Google Smart Lock to keep your device unlocked in secure environments if you put some trusted locations or devices. It also has the Google Password Manager to autocomplete some fields, but you know that this manager sometimes works and sometimes does not work and does not verify first through fingerprint that it is you unless you change it in the configuration. Finally, an option that could be considered within the security and privacy options is the application cloner, so you can use 2 accounts of the same app on the same device. However, it feels like a simple experience because it doesn't integrate app lock, secure folder, chilled mode, or similar things. The battery is 5010 mAh and it performed what on average devices with 5000 mAh batteries perform. So it neither surprises nor disappoints. It has a normal saving mode for day-to-day use, and it also has a super saving mode which comes in handy in an emergency since it will restrict the use of your cell phone, although it is very curious that it does not allow you to add applications that are essential for you. So it will only allow you to use the phone, messages, clock and settings. Another thing that it doesn't do very well with respect to the battery is manage the apps running in the background, because in order to prioritize the battery, it will close them in a very aggressive way. So I didn't like the battery experience as much. Its charger is 18 watts, and in 15 minutes we got about 19% power back. In 30 minutes, 36%, and the full charge was completed in 1 hour and 50 minutes. I think the charging is one of its strongest points, because not only is it going to be fast, but it even has a smart charging mode. So in case you are one of those users who usually leave your cell phone charging all night, the battery can be protected so that it does not deteriorate so quickly. The connectivity of this device is simple, with support for Wi-Fi 5 networks as well as 4G networks. It does not have specific data blocking for each application and does not have NFC in Mexico, although in other regions the version with this chip is available. It integrates Bluetooth 5.1, and fortunately it is capable of projecting its screen wirelessly to more devices and not only to Chromecast. So, I must tell you that it has good speed. It won't be the fastest in its range, but in this sense it doesn't disappoint. However, if you are looking for a device with a gyroscope, unfortunately this device will not have it. It only has a light sensor, accelerometer, physical proximity sensor, and we also have gravity sensor and linear acceleration, but as I say, no gyroscope or geomagnetic field sensor. And although TCL is a considerably large manufacturer of home appliances and TVs, their ecosystem is actually in development. They do offer a tablet and a headset, but they don't really interact very well with each other. They don't have a smartwatch, and in many ways they still rely on Google-developed technologies like Nearby Share and Google Fast Pair to interact with other devices. Fortunately, by having Android and these Google technologies, they can communicate in a simple way with devices from other brands, but TCL still does not have something very developed. Cloud storage relies on Google Drive, control of Internet of Things devices relies on Google Home, so the experience feels very simple and with little brand strength. This device has the Helio G-Mare processor, a very simple processor that really does not go according to the price in which it is distributed. This is probably its weakest point, and you are going to notice it because applications open very slowly. The system in general is going to run very slow in transitions and more, and it even has a very weak GPU, which we'll go over in a moment in gaming. Approximately 5.8 seconds on average in opening each of the 12 applications I ran. It's definitely clear that the processor is not a strong point. The good thing is that it has 6 GB of RAM, and even the manufacturer adds another 6 GB of virtual RAM. So that's what we're testing in this case, to see if it can really keep all these applications open, and it seems that it can, despite being a device that did not promise much in the processor. The advantage is that it has good RAM, and once the applications are already open, they can be kept running. Although I insist that even the interaction within applications and in system areas could get to feel very weak. Watch, let's scroll through here so you can see more or less how it can get to feel a bit sluggish. As you notice, some reactions don't feel fast. I'm going to scroll through this application again so you can see for yourself how sometimes it's just that it feels like a stumbling motion. I think what it may struggle with the most is showing some videos which, as you realize, may show more drawbacks. So it offers a very weak processor but good RAM and even excellent storage. This will easily be its strongest point as it has 256 GB. This is a capacity that is very uncommon to see in devices in this price range, so it's not going to fill you up very quickly. In fact, it's going to take you a long time to fill it up, considering that it's not a device that you can install a lot of games on or anything like that because it doesn't have that much power. So it's going to allow you to store a lot of applications, a lot of images, a lot of videos. Undoubtedly, I like this point very much. It should be noted that there is also another version around the world with 4 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage, and you can put a micro SD card of up to 1 TB. Next, let's do our traditional test by exporting a video in full HD, joining 4 clips recorded in that same resolution with this device. Let's see how long it takes. It finished in practically a minute, proving that the GPU is pretty weak because you have to consider that the video was in full HD. In Call of Duty, by default, this device selects the low graphics quality at a medium rate. The only thing we can do is to go up to a high rate, but keeping this graphic quality, so we don't have access to many effects. With this setting in Call of Duty, it did quite well, in fact. Although the screen recording can be a bit tricky, since in this case it didn't record when we were playing, but either way you're seeing it perform well. In fact, it's quite curious that it climbed above 30 frames per second at this rate, but oh well. The warm-up can get slightly high, but nothing serious. In the Legends game, we have the automatic setting, and for testing, we set it to medium graphics detail at 60 frames per second for the price. This definitely confirmed to us that this device was not made for people who like to game, as the experience was not good. There were several moments of freezing, heating was a bit higher, poor stability and poor fluidity, so I would definitely not recommend this device for this type of use cases. In the SpongeBob game, oddly enough by default, it loads the resolution and epic quality. This is the wrong setting for a device of this price, so we set it to low resolution, medium quality and 60 frames per second. But even with these settings, the device was not able to run this content smoothly, so the experience is really bad. Not only because it shows slow movements, but also because the screen responds very slowly when playing, and that gives you a feeling of too much slowness in a cell phone. Finally, in Asphalt, there is no 60 frames per second option, so we run it on the default setting. Consider that this game is almost always optimized perfectly to the resources that even low-end devices have, but here we noticed that it did not have a very remarkable stability. And even it did not even had an average close to 30 frames per second, so it definitely stands out too much that the experience was not good. Definitely that at this price you will find many devices that will run better all games, so it is not a team that I will recommend for this type of user. For the moment, this has been all regarding this device. I hope you liked this video. If so, you know you can indicate it, and we'll see you next time.